My own perspective on these issues of how to obtain grant funding is shaped not only by my experience as a local funder at the Community Foundation, which is the largest grant maker in the Greater New Haven area, but also from my experience of having been a federal grant maker. In 1994-1995, as Assistant Secretary of Commerce, I ran the federal government's Domestic Economic Development Agency, which is the Economic Development Administration, or EDA. And over that time period, a little over a year, about 15 months that I was in that position, I was responsible for giving away about $700 million in grants to local economic development projects around the country. So these two perspectives, local private philanthropy on the one hand, national public grant making on the other, while very different, local versus national, one obviously at EDA with broad accountability to the political process, and here at the Community Foundation being about mobilizing private philanthropy, one administered to a large public bureaucracy, one to a flexible private institution. These are very different ways of carrying out the work, but they do have some commonalities which I can reflect upon at this point. One commonality I'll start with, not totally tongue-in-cheek, has to do with the relationship between grant seekers and grant funders. When I took my current job almost 6 years ago now at the Community Foundation, one of my colleagues in the Community Foundation world said to me, welcome to the Foundation world. You'll never have an honest conversation or a bad meal again. That proved to be true, at least in the context of the meals. When I went to the federal government, of course, the federal government grant seekers aren't allowed to buy meals for federal officials. So that part of the advice didn't apply, but I really found the same thing. I remember very shortly, within a matter of a week probably, of becoming assistant secretary, I was in California. It was right after, this was January, February of 1994, it was right after the earthquake in Los Angeles. And the federal government had just appropriated Congress had just appropriated about $250 million to EDA to begin the planning for post-disaster economic recovery. And I was with the Secretary of Commerce, who was my boss, Ron Brown, and we were together. We had about $250 million to spend. We were at a big auditorium in Los Angeles. There were about 700 people there, and we were about to go on, and he turned to me and he said, I was friendly with John, he turned to me and he said, they're going to cheer loudly, they're going to tell you what you say is brilliant, but just don't fall into the trap of thinking they agree with anything that you say. So it was the same basic message about the relationship between grant seekers and grant makers. Another commonality that I found is that, as Bill Heinrich said, as he was sort of framing this conversation today, is that the process of raising grant funding, and I'm sure I don't need to tell you all of this, but the process of raising grant funding is truly both complex and highly competitive. I can attest to the competitive aspects of this. The Community Foundation this year, in terms of new responsive grant making that we're going to do in 2006, and we're in that process now, we have about $6 in requests for every dollar we have available this year in new responsive grant making. So the issue that we have to determine, the issue that we have to face, is not whether a particular grant application is worthy, whether it presents a worthy case for funding. Most of those, 600% of the funds available, present very strong cases for funding. The issue is, how does that application stack up against all the others that we're looking at? In terms of the priorities that we articulate for ourselves, how does a particular grant stack up against the competition? So I can truly underscore how competitive the process is. And nothing that I can say, or I would suggest nothing that anybody can say this morning is going to change that reality. But I would offer just a couple of framing suggestions from my experience to keep in mind as you listen this morning and as you take this learning back and formulate your own future funding strategies. First, be inspirational. You all are inspired by your work. It's why you do what you do. You're inspired by the importance of your work in the lives of people, how your work touches others, how the services you provide change people's lives. And And as difficult as this can be, and it is difficult, try to find ways to convey what inspires you within the 8x11 of a grant application. At the center of successful fundraising, whether you're talking to individuals or applying to institutions, is moving the party who's reading what you write to see the issue, the challenge, the program, the proposal, through the same inspired eyes that you see it, and not through the bleary eyes of someone who's read a pile of grant applications this big and has the same size of pile still to go. So be inspirational, easier said than done. Secondly, and this echoes what we just heard from Julie, convey impact. Now, this may be the other end of the spectrum from inspiration, but it's just as important, at least certainly to us at the Community Foundation it is. And at the heart of how we've remade our grant-making processes this year and last year is this idea of impact. Understanding the impact that your work has, being able to speak to it in ways that are not only inspiring, but in ways that quantify what you do and how it impacts the issues you're addressing is critical to private funders and public funders alike. Again, it's not easy. The Community Foundation feels struggles with how to do this. We in fact work with many of you on new ways to do this, new software programs and other ways to do this. So there's no easy way to do this, there's no tried and true formula to do this, but it is essential, and I would remind you of that. And thirdly, as you think about sort of framing principles, think cooperation. Some of the strongest applications, and indeed some of the strongest programs that I've seen in my tenure at the Community Foundation have been when nonprofit organizations approach the funding challenge not from the perspective of how do I compete with other agencies that are providing the same services, and certainly, as I said before, it is very competitive, but also how can I cooperate with other agencies in this community who are engaged in similar work or complementary work to create a whole that's greater than the sum of the parts, to be able to do more than any of us could do individually. Again, as I said, some of the strongest applications that I've seen start from the starting point. Some of the strongest programs that we funded and feel best about carry out this view, and I would urge you to think about this as well. So, I fear that in some ways I've made the complex and challenging and competitive task that you all here to learn about even more complex. Telling you that other facts code will be able to quantify them at the same time to inspire people on the other side of the table. To think not only about what your agency can do, but how you can work with others. These are all challenges, and as I said, I fear that having made the challenge even more difficult, I now have the privilege of turning this program over to the panelists to tell you how to do all these difficult things. So thank you again to Congressman Delauro and to Bill Heinrichs, and to all of the panelists who you're going to hear from this morning, and indeed to all of you for coming together to work on these issues that are so important to our community. I wish you much learning this morning and much success in carrying your learning back to the work you do.